So I spent 2 weeks down at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, synthesizing the materials of the future at the Joint Institute of Advanced Materials. So what are advanced materials? Basically, you have your normal materials in everyday. They're naturally occurring. They're in everyday products. But what advanced materials are is we take those naturally occurring materials and molecularly modify them so that they're synthetically made and they give off unique properties. So there are a lot of classes and different types of advanced materials, but they're used in things like airplane engines, semiconductors and computers, nanomaterials, which I don't really have time to go into. So they have a lot of unique properties. That is a airplane engine with turboconductors used in synthesized and advanced materials. This is kind of the structure that defines the characteristic of a advanced material. Some examples of revolutionary advanced materials that have already been implemented. There's aluminum bubble wrap, and it's 50 times stronger than sheet metal, but weighs 30% less. So it could be what we're seeing in our packaging in the next future years. And graphene aerogel. Aerogel has its own category in advanced materials. There's a lot of different types. But this one in particular, it's the lightest material in the world currently. It's actually lighter than helium, which is the second element on the periodic table, and it's used to float balloons, so it's pretty light. And it can absorb up to 800 times its weight in oil, which can be used in oil spills to clean up ocean habitats, and that's a conversation for another day. So the ones that I worked on, this is a class of advanced materials. They're called high-entropy oxides. They're very new, and if you do a Google search on them, you will only find like scholarly articles. You won't really find anything. But so they have a diverse molecular makeup. So high entropy basically means randomness. And we're bringing a whole bunch of different elements into one compound, and it gives off very unique properties. All to one, like, for example, it has reversible energy storage and phase distortion. So those are pretty scientific, but essential in future products. And it provides a lot of molecular strength, so these materials are seen in building structures and things like that. So the procedure for synthesizing the materials it was a pretty tedious process. So first we would have to weigh out up to like 10 elements per sample to plus or minus 2/10,000ths of a gram. So we were there just kind of like edging it in, trying to get the smallest speck of an element we could for, like a pretty long time. Then we had to clean all the utensils that we used in weighing the samples with isopropanol ethanol, just to reduce contaminants and pollutants that might show up when we read our samples later. And after that, we'd mix all the elements into one sample, evenly distributed in a ball mill mixer. After this, we would press the sample into a 1/4-inch pellet in a hydraulic press at 3 tons of force for about 5 to 10 minutes, and this basically ensures that the pellet is strong enough to be calcined or put in a furnace, and it will bond properly. And when we were calcining these samples, each sample had a different furnace it needed to go in because the temperatures that it would help it bond would rise at different rates, stay at a different climax temperature, and decrease at different rates. So we had to use individual furnaces for most of our samples, which was really time-consuming. We had to label our samples very descriptively in an organized format. This is the furnace we would put things in. Those are 2 samples that are the same. And this is the hydraulic press. We would put our samples inside that metal casing, and it would press inside that at a 1/4 inch or whatever diameter this piece is. And then this is a purging chamber where we would keep pure elements that cannot be oxidized or basically react with oxygen. They have to be kept alone and separate from any molecules. So yeah, we kept them in a vacuum chamber. So after we had our samples, we would test them for purity just to make sure that all of the sample is uniformly bonded and there's no contaminants or anything like that. We would do this with an X-ray diffractor, and it shoots light, X-ray light, at the sample while rotating the emitter at different angles theta, and it would the light that passes through would be read by a sensor, but also the light that doesn't pass through. So as you can see, so this noise down here is where the X-ray diffractor is hitting the sample, and these peaks are where the light is passing through. So by this, we can tell the structure of the actual molecule and how uniform it is by matching this data up with a database that has lab-grade data with $1 million equipment, so they get really good results with no noise, and we can match up the peaks to see how pure our sample is. So after this, we would use scanning electron microscopes that are capable of zooming in thousands and thousands of times the view of a human eye. And by this, we could look at, down here, each individual element or compound in our sample lights up in its own color, and we can actually see it in the sample, and we can see the distribution of it to see if it's uniform. And also, we can also tell how strong the structure is by looking at the grains. Basically, you can see some disconnect here and here, but you want your sample to look solid throughout. And those grains, that, like right here, this is a really strong bonded area, but other areas are more cracked. It's hard to get that grain to bond. And the goal of all this is we need to get all the elements in our sample at even ratios so that there's no stray elements or contaminants. So my advice to future interns is this is by far more than an internship. It's just as much of a time for personal growth, and especially was for me being by myself. Most of the time I was alone trying to make friends rather than people trying to make friends with me. And it's you have to make decisions and opinions about things that you like and what you don't like, because you're going to need to know that in life, and this internship might influence what you do in life. So pay attention, don't just do the work and have it on your resume. And I'd like to say thank you to all the people who made it possible.